Hello, students. This is Dr. Henry, and I'm your instructor for BUS 215 Business Communication. This week, we're actually going to cover two chapters because they are closely connected. Chapter 5 talks about creating effective business messages, and Chapter 6 talks about improving the readability of your business messages with the style and design. All right, so we're going to start with Chapter 5. And so the first thing it talks about, or the first thing I want to highlight that it talks about, is the process for when you're creating a business message. Now, there may be many different reasons why you have to create a business message. It could be, to highlight a new project. It could be to discuss an important business problem or a new business opportunity. But in either case, or in any case, you have to do this process, or the authors of our book suggest that you do this process, and that is to plan, write it, and then review it. All right, so when you're planning, you want to take into account your audience. Who is this message going out to? What is it you want to say? You want to make sure that you gather the right information and develop your message. This is all in the planning stage, which is here. Next, when it's time to write, after you have analyzed your audience and you have thought about the right information, then you want to begin writing. And so you have to set the tone of the message. You want it to be clear and concise. And then that navigation piece, which is also hinted to in Chapter 6, you want to make sure that it's easy to navigate through the content of your message. And then last, you want to review it. You want to possibly proofread, double check your spelling and grammar. You want to possibly get feedback when you can. And make sure that the message is accurate and it covers the information comprehensively or to the degree that it needs to. And then you want it to make sure also that it's fair, especially when it is considering other departments or other businesses, for example. All right, so in our book, it emphasizes that the most important aspect is the planning aspect. So here in this little graph, it talks about poor writers, average writers, and excellent writers. Notice that the excellent writer spends most of their time in the planning stage, which is what we just talked about. And then they draft and review. So keep that in mind, that the more time you spend in the planning stage, the easier your message development will go and the more effective it will be. All right, so in the planning stage, because this is most important, your book describes the AIM process, AIM, and the A component is where you analyze the audience, like we discussed, and you gather the information. So the I is information gathering, and then the M is message development, so where you're going to be doing your writing. And so all of this is in the planning stage. And so this little acronym has been designed to help you to remember what to do in the planning stage, which is the most important piece. Other things to focus on in this chapter, again, I'm just going to kind of highlight. When gathering information, it talks about you want to think about what are some key questions related to the issue that you're going to discuss. It talks about using a variety of sources. Don't just use one source because, one source might be biased, but if you get information from several sources, you will have a very more comprehensive view and a more balanced view of the issue. Same with those of you who watch the news, some news outlets lean a certain way and then some leans a different way. Same with authors and different book authors. So you want to make sure you get a variety of sources so you can find the common ground about the issue. You want to have well-reasoned conclusions that's based on your research. You want to be open to alternatives, and then you want to find ways to solve complex problems based on your information that you gathered. When you come to the message development stage, you want to think about how you're going to frame or set up the primary message. So you need to know what is the main thing you want your audience to know, and then you need to describe that with very creative and vivid language using 15 or fewer words. And then you want to have a logic or reasoning behind your message. So you need to have supporting points that gives credibility to your message. And if there's something you want the reader to do, you need to make sure that's present. And it needs to be presented in a logical way, a way that is, accurate and makes sense to the reader. All right, so when you're developing your message, the book describes two different approaches you could use. So we have the direct or deductive approach. In this particular approach, you state your message from the beginning and then you follow it with supporting points. And then in the indirect or inductive approach, you present your points first and then follow it with the message. So the example could be if you need to clean out the refrigerator at work, because if people are putting in things every day and nobody ever cleans it, it's gonna pile up. So you could say, hey everybody, there's if you use the indirect or inductive approach, you'll say, hey, there's a smell coming from the refrigerator, there's no room for the new employees to put their food. And then you lead to your primary message, hey, we need to clean out the refrigerator. Versus here in the direct or deductive approach, you would say, we need to clean out the work refrigerator once a week. And then you would list your reasons. There's no room, there's a smell, example, for etc. For example, so you can see the difference in the two approaches, but both are effective. And also, this PowerPoint in your book does do a good job with giving you examples of a less effective and more effective example. So you also want to read through those as you go through the book. The tone of your message is vitally important because you could, put your readers off in the very beginning if it doesn't have a good tone or positive tone. So ways to make sure that your writing has a positive tone is the attitude needs to result in, and this needs to be reflected in your writing, a better workplace performance, more creativity, motivation to excel, is helpful to coworkers, helpful to customers and clients. So it needs to have this spin on it, so that people will receive what you're saying. And for this particular chapter, I'm trying to make sure that, that was what I wanted to cover for this particular chapter. So the main thing is the stages for effectively creating an effective message, which is the plan, write, and review, and then making sure that you use in the planning stage the aim, which I think I skipped it. Or did I skip it? Yeah, you want to use the aim, which is analyze your audience, information gathering, and then message development. So that's the key things I wanted you to focus on for chapter 5. Chapter 6 is all about improving readability of your message. So once you've written it or you've drafted it, now you need to put it in a format that people will be able to easily read and navigate, because if it's too many words, if there's not enough white space, for example, the message can get lost, even if you have an effective business message and you went and took the time to do the stages, plan, write and review, and the aim process. Even if you took the time to do that and you have a great, wonderful message that has a positive tone, the way you design it and set it up can hinder people from getting to your message. So that's how, chapter 5 and 6 are related. And so here in chapter 6, it talks about to improve readability, you want to use these strategies. You want to make sure you provide all the relevant information. So everything that the reader could possibly want to know about your message, you can always think through questions they might have, build those into your message so you don't have to come back and answer them later. Be accurate and specific. If you're going to use percentages, make sure they're up to date and they're accurate so that the reader will have the best information possible. And what I was trying to show is that in this chapter 6, it also, again, advises us to use that plan, write, and review. That is the exact same process that's highlighted in chapter 6. So just keep that in mind. It's the same plan, write, and review for when you're writing the message and also when you are designing it for readability. All right. So we talked about being accurate. It gives examples. I wanted to get to here. All right, so here are some things that the book suggests as it relates to when you are ready to design your message for readability. Here are some things you want to think about. Omit needless words or words that don't help the reader to understand what you're saying. And this is usually done by limiting the number of words that you use. So the fewer words, the better. And this can be done through controlling the length of each paragraph, controlling the length of sentences, avoiding redundancy or saying the same thing more than one time, using empty phrases that don't help what your main point is, and then being too wordy. So these are things you want to avoid. It has some suggestions for paragraph length. So I'm not sure if you've ever thought about this, but in Word, there is a feature that'll count your words, and you can do that per paragraph, or you can do that for the entire document or page that you're on. So it says paragraphs should contain about 40 to 80 words. And depending on the type of message that you're going to be doing, it should be 20 to 30 words is what they recommend. And I think there's a graph. Yeah. Okay, so the reason that you want to monitor the length of your sentences and paragraphs is because comprehension goes down the more words you use. So here in this graph, it talks about the percentage of comprehension. This is what your readers understand in your message, and the number of words used. So here's 0 words to 30 words. Around 20 words, and this is per sentence, the reader's comprehension begins to go way down. And so this means that they're no longer understanding what you're trying to say. So in order to keep comprehension high, which is the reader understanding exactly what your message is saying, it says for each sentence you should use less than 20 words. And here again in your book, it has a lot of great examples that you should go through. But for the purposes of this PowerPoint, I'm trying to pinpoint the main things for you to focus on. There's another, I think one more thing I wanted to highlight from this particular chapter, or maybe two more things. You want to avoid using what they call in the business industry buzzwords or figures of speech, because depending on the background of your audience and those you're talking to, they may not understand what you're saying. And the book gives examples. So something as simple as going viral. Depending on the generation they're in, they may or may not understand what you're saying here if you use these kinds of terms. Downsizing might be confused depending on your audience. So here are some examples of buzzwords that might be confused in the workplace. And so it says to avoid using those. And okay, here's the a great important tip. This is the last thing I wanted to cover from chapter 6. Other ways to improve your reading, the readability of your message, is with navigational design. And so you should design your document or your message so that it's easy for the reader to navigate. So you want to use headings. So if once they see a heading, they'll know, okay, everything in this section is talking about this heading title, for example. Sometimes you'll use highlighting. Sometimes it's appropriate to use lists. It's always appropriate to use white space. White space breaks up the page so that it's not text heavy, and it makes it easier on the eye for the reader. And then you want your message or your outline to be simple. You want it to have a flow and a pattern. All of these things make your message easier to read and more likely for the reader to understand what you're saying. So these were my little points for chapters 5 and 6. Thanks for listening. Bye.